Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today, we're exploring the global view of an Iowa native, Samantha Thomas, from Des Moines. She has worked in Nepal, Ghana, South Africa, South Korea, and Tanzania, from handling dangerous cobras to art therapy. Her global view is now at home in Iowa. She joins us to share her views on Iowa from the perspective of her global experiences. Samantha, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Thank you, Peter. Well, what an honor to be amongst such a brilliant host and an absolutely amazing, motivating human being. We greatly appreciate you in all aspects of health. You definitely speak volumes for Iowa. And to say a little bit about myself, wow, a native. What can I say? I love the great state of Iowa, and it is truly an honor to be here. But yes, just as you did with the introduction, I have done those things, and I've appreciated every moment of being on the road. It feels very good to be back home. It feels very good to embrace the warm and wonderful communities throughout Iowa and all of the amazing people in them. So thank you.
Well, I know you graduated from Drake. And
Yes.
then you went to the prestigious Johns Hopkins.
I did.
And, it's an interesting journey. What's the first thing that led you out into the world?
You know what, Peter? I'm so glad that you asked this question because I like to think of it as starting off with a piece of art. And it was art and artifacts that led me on this wild global adventure. My father was an avid historian and loved to learn and teach about history. So I have a great representation. It's not old, but I don't know if the folks at home can really see this beautiful artifact. It is of a Ganesh. It's a Ganesh sculpture from Nepal. And really, it came down to creating a world that incorporated fine art and travel and being able to preserve and promote the amazing cultures from around the world. That's what brought me to the road that I took. And I'm still taking.
Now, you did some interesting research and work overseas as well. What are some of those projects?
Absolutely. So when I was working with Johns Hopkins for my master's degree, I was able to develop this amazing program on snakebite mitigation strategies in northeastern Tanzania. And what did that mean? Oh, that meant adventure, to say the least. So this is the most recent global project and global endeavor that I've worked on. There was an opportunity to go and collaborate with individuals in South Africa, where I learned to handle forest cobras and black mambas and green mambas and puff adders and every lovely, interesting, venomous snake you could possibly imagine. And from there, I had the pleasure of going up and working with the very brilliant and talented Maasai communities in Ruvu Jitengeni, northeastern Tanzania. Made a lot of great friends and got to work with wonderful doctors on figuring out ways to reduce the impact of snake bite without using antivenom.
Yeah, it was interesting. And talking to you before the show, one of my graduate advisors was Laura Bohannon, who wrote Returning to Laughter under the pseudonym Elizabeth Bowen. She was the first anthropologist to live with the Maasai tribe. So I thought, how fascinating that connection after all these years. And you had said something when you talked about handling cobras and stopping snake bites, and I probably had a typical reaction of not liking snakes. But it's not about eliminating snakes, because snakes are also necessary to their ecosystem. Tell us about that.
100%. Without biodiversity, we would have some rather large problems on our hands. If we don't have snakes, we have a higher driven rat population. We have creatures that will eat crops and creatures that will wreak havoc on populations. They bring things like plague, and we really don't want to see a rise of plague and these other potentially hazardous health concerns come into communities. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I chose to pursue snakebite mitigation, as well as the opportunity to incorporate malaria treatment. As we know, or many of you may not know, insecticide-treated nets help provide care for any risk of malaria. And so what a team of local Tanzanian officials and I were doing were bringing nets out, insecticide-treated nets to communities in northeastern Tanzania and providing them assistance with hanging up the nets. So it was, of course, a package strategy. That's what we call it in public health. Package.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but now these nets specifically were over like children and adults sleeping.
Yes.
So that while they were asleep, they wouldn't get bitten. Okay.
Yes. So it was not only helping individuals gain access to reduction of potential risk of malaria, but it was also the risk for snake bite. Many of the cobras that were common to this specific region would come and try to get through the nets, and they were not able to, making it much more effective for not only malaria, but also to reduce the impact of any potential snake bite.
What were snakes searching for when they were getting close to people at night? Was it the heat of the person or?
Very much so. So snakes would often enter Maasai bomas or Maasai homes looking for either A, food, because if food isn't properly stored, and in many cases it wasn't, the rats and mice would come in, and also the heat. Of course, we know that at night it gets very, very cold. That was one of the challenging parts of working in Tanzania. You have these really cold, chilly nights, and then you have these really warm days. And at night, the snakes would come into the homes and they would end up looking for that heat and end up, unfortunately, biting people.
All right, we're going to take a short break. We come back, we'll continue our conversation with Samantha Thomas, an admittedly restless native of Iowa, and some of the reasons that these lessons that she learned overseas make some sense in Iowa as well. See you all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzzed and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening. Our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. We'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome back to Surviving Bad. We're talking with Samantha Thomas, whose work throughout the world has given her a unique perspective of Iowa. But let's hear some more about some of those interesting projects she's worked on throughout the world. Samantha, you talked about Nepal and stuff you've done there. Tell us more.
Definitely. So Nepal was a really interesting place to visit, and I recommend it, whether it's through National Geographic or through one of the other wonderful travel shows that you can find. I would recommend taking a look at the beautiful country that is Nepal. I have went and worked in Nepal off and on for many, many years now. 5 different trips. One, unfortunately, involved an earthquake, but the others involved a wonderful coalition of nonprofit organizations, child workers in Nepal being one of them, or CWIN would be the acronym. Absolutely great people that are working to ensure that all children and women have access to equal rights and equal participation and opportunities throughout the country. They're doing some amazing work.
So what was your hands-on experience in Nepal?
Oh, hands-on experience working with lots of different rural communities to provide some sustainable development projects that would empower women. So if that was making a handicraft or making something that would relieve joint pain after a long day's work in the field, because if you're in rural Nepal, you have access to land and you're generally working out in remote field areas. That's kind of the big way to make money. So many people would come home after a long day and they'd have pain in their back or their knees. So a group of volunteers and myself would go out and we would teach women how to make a homemade pain cream using chili peppers and coconut oil that would help relieve the tension in their knees, their backs, and their joints.
Now, you had mentioned that you were in Nepal after the earthquake, and it was devastating. I know people that were in Nepal at that time. It completely undermined the entire infrastructure of a country. It was an international incident. Most of the structures were not built to be able to handle an earthquake, so you had a huge amount of fatalities.
Yes.
I presume you've been there since. How resilient has that nation been in recovering from the earthquake?
Well, at the time of the earthquake, I was actually on a bus with about 30 other people coming back from being out in the field with 2 volunteers when the earthquake started, and experiencing that, going back to Kathmandu and seeing the damage. The first scariest moment was recognizing that this beautiful tower I had just visited with volunteers had collapsed. It was called Dadahara, and that was in central Kathmandu. Recognizing how painful and how challenging it was to rebuild and to see that type of disparity wakes you up to realize how fortunate we are and the things that we often take for granted in the States. What I can say is Nepal is an incredibly brilliant, resilient place to be. You have such strong, talented people that are able to recover, and they're able to speak and use their voices for the greater good. And that is one thing that I've always respected and admired about the wonderful communities in Nepal.
It's interesting as you say that, because I also remember after many crises in Iowa, when you're dealing with the media, one of the issues that comes up is sort of this Iowa strong, the resilience, the ability for Iowans to bounce back from derechos and other things. I mean, quite frankly, there isn't a place in the country that isn't exposed to some form of natural disaster. But Iowans have a unique sort of resilient place on the landscape of America. What's it like looking at issues? Now you've been back for a few years in Iowa. What's it like looking at issues in Iowa, especially issues maybe with youth, in context of what happens globally and what happens here closer to home?
What I see now more than ever in that train of thought is I'm seeing big changes in the state of Iowa with youth. I'm seeing youth that are not afraid to raise their voices and say, hey, enough. You're one way or another, I will find a way to use my voice, to use my creativity, to use my mind, and show you that, hey, we're not just teenagers, we're not just young people, we're an active participant in these communities and in these cultures. And that's what makes it so wonderful to see, is when you can connect that to how youth respond in places like Nepal. Some of the most talented, brilliant writers, artists, movers and shakers, social changers in Nepal are so similar to the activists and the young people today in Iowa. They're speaking up and saying, you will listen. It's just absolutely incredible to see how powerful those voices are.
Wow, that's a great point. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to ask you to share your views on youth throughout the world, the lessons you see applying to growing up in Iowa for kids today. See y'all after the break. You don't want to miss this.
Multiple studies have shown that marijuana can slow both driver reaction and response time, which can be really dangerous. He's here. He's here. Wait. What? I can't drive. Why? I'm high. Oh.
Every second, 127 new devices connect to the internet. You can feel it happening, our digital world expanding with every breath. We're entering a whole new era of connectivity, and MediaCom will be ready to power it with one of the nation's first 10G platforms. we'll be bringing you more speed, more capacity, more security, and the power to do more than you ever dreamed possible.
We're talking with Samantha Thomas on the importance of accepting the idea that culturally youth are not so dissimilar halfway around the world or here, and that in this day and age, peer-to-peer rather than parent-child relationships may become extremely important for bringing up a new generation of leaders. What are some of your insights on this concept, Samantha?
Absolutely. As youth continue to grow, as young people continue to embrace their voices, what I'm seeing is a lot of similarities, not only in Nepal, but also throughout the African continent, in Ghana and in Tanzania and in South Africa. Young people now more than ever are able to say, okay, how do I get active in what I want to see a change in? How am I able to raise my voice instead of saying, oh no, my parents are going to do that, or oh no, I don't have any role in that. Young people nowadays are getting up and saying, who do I call? Who do I communicate with? How do I get my voice, my perspective, and my vision to be seen and to be heard? And that is so powerful, because now more than ever, although we identify with lots of wonderful different cultures, that's what makes Iowa so great. That's one thing that I have to say, Peter, I just love about the state is Robert Ray, one of my favorite people on earth, because he brought so many wonderful people to this beautiful state. And I think he made it a much more rich and interesting, knowledgeable place to be. So having the wonderful cultures that we have represented in Iowa and also in Nepal, there is something to be said about how many different communities are being seen, are visible, and using their voices. Doesn't matter how small they think it is, they're standing up for what they believe in and they're making it known to the world. And this is power.
You know, it's interesting because we look at one of the globally, one of the areas of concern that most teens have is global climate change. And Greta Thunberg, virtually a child, has really raised the awareness of the entire globe on this issue. But there's something that's often not pointed out, is that behind her were two parents that were 100% with her on doing this. Definitely. And so often kids in developing a worldview are doing this on their own without the active engagement of their parents. And I think for a parent that's older, we didn't have to have that responsibility when we were raising our children, because the world didn't have the internet, the kids weren't as connected, and they weren't using as much of their brains to process as much information that we had to. So I think a lot of the change too has to be driven in by family, and parents need to not only find out what their children are thinking, but how they can help them bring to the forefront the issues that are important to them. Now, in your work around the world, did you see that happening as well?
100%. The strongest individuals and the real movers and shakers in the community were led by their parents. Many parents, many inspirational people that were that acted as an aunt or an uncle would always step up and say, hey, this is how we create that change. And having that family connection, having that family tie is important. While it doesn't matter who you identify as a parent, I think the idea is having someone in your life that you can connect with that might be a little bit older, that can help you create that narrative and create that kind of cohesive voice that everyone needs to be able to stand up for what they really believe is right.
So when I think about what you're saying,
sure,
I don't always feel as if here in Iowa or the Midwest in general, parents are really stepping up to the plate to back their kids up on a lot of these things. Even if they are talking to them, they're not necessarily encouraging them to basically stick their heads out of the sand and speak out. But is that just my unfair bias? What do you see comparing youth populations around the world to what you see coming back to Iowa?
That's a very, very interesting perspective that you have, and it's very challenging to assess it, but I'll give it my best. I do think now more than ever, what we have seen is a rise of young people being mentored, and especially in recent years, saying, hey, no, we don't like this. Hey, we want to see effective change in certain areas of our culture here in Iowa. And seeing those voices come out and stand up for what they believe in, I think is definitely powerful. And whether that is driven by a mentor or by a parent or an aunt, an uncle, grandma, whoever it might be, you're seeing a rise in that voice. While overseas, one thing that I experienced is a closer tie to family in many cases, especially in Nepal. Families were very, very, very well connected to one another, and they were constantly trying to motivate and inspire and empower each other to be better. So I suppose it depends on how you want to look at this. I know from my own personal experience growing up, I lost my dad at a pretty young age. I was about 22 when he passed. And I remember feeling voiceless for a long time. How do I go out? How do I share what he gave me, that fire that he put in my belly when I was a youth, and inspire the world? So there are lots of challenges that I think young people have today, both locally and globally in that sense.
Oh, that's great information. And we're going to take a short break. And afterwards, we're going to ask Samantha to share some final comments, insights, and inspiration. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
Today, more than ever, you need fast, reliable internet. At MediaCom, we want you to know you can count on us. Our fiber-powered 100% gigabit technology network was built for the future. We have enormous capacity and power and 99.99% network reliability. So even though these are uncertain times, we're prepared, and you can be certain we'll keep your world connected.
The black truck? Hey, Christina from accounting.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, I used to date a girl named Christina.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she dumped me for my best friend. You want to see some photos of them that I took?
I don't.
I thought we talked about this, buddy.
Buzzed and overshared again?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna call a car.
That's a smart idea.
So yeah, I know, that's why I did it.
Hey, you're gonna get back to the top of the mountain.
Does that mean I'm gonna get back with Christina?
No.
Oh.
No.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we're talking about how a global perspective on building communities and youth engagement makes sense in Iowa. Let's see what insights, advice, and inspiration Samantha has to share. Now, Sam, you've had this great, rich experience of being around the world, and a lot of kids would love to do things like that, and they should be inspired too. And I'd love to have you tell them about how to do it. But before we get to that, you had a couple of really neat things you shared with me. Can you tell us about them a little bit and share the story about how they came to be?
Absolutely. So you never know when you're going to find interesting things. And throughout the pandemic, one thing that I did was look for interesting and unique pieces, because travel was harder than usual to be able to make happen. This is a jar that, as you can see, is carved. From what I've analyzed, this is actually a very interesting type of hair on top here. And you can see how neatly carved this is. So this is a beautiful piece of Yoruban art. Comes from the Yoruba tribe throughout,
And it's called a spirit jar. And what gives it that name?
Because of the characters on top, you can see that there is this mythical creature that the people are riding, and then you have the two people or two spirit-looking characters on top. So this is a recent find of mine. And I'm still continuing to do the research on it. Sadly, I did not bring it back from native land. It was actually purchased here in Iowa. Shows that you can find wonderful things in Iowa to keep your mind intrigued and engaged in all kinds of curiosity and fun. This piece is actually a hand-beaded wire snake that was made in South Africa. It is a very traditional art form down off the Dolphin Coast. You can find these beautiful wire sculptures that are made by artisans everywhere. And this was a gift after I learned how to handle venomous snakes.
Well, that's a memory I hope you treasure better than I treasure the thought of.
I could tell you stories, Peter. I could tell you stories. Trying to get that through customs on an airplane was a challenge.
So let's talk about kids that want to do some of the stuff you've done. How would you help them?
If I could give young people advice today, anything, be passionate, be curious, and be hungry, but think about what you can do across the pond on an academic level. There are plenty of options for you to get involved with nonprofit organizations, but also with academic institutions. DMAC has a wonderful opportunity to study abroad, and Drake University, also has some phenomenal opportunities for study abroad. If you're really keen on getting involved, get curious about the world, study, learn lots, and don't be afraid to ask challenging questions. Even in high schools today, I know that there are many different study abroad programs that are accessible. And for those that are in their teen years where they're working a part-time job and they want to just, save money for a game or save money for a new smartphone, think about how you could put that money to good use if you're eager to travel the world, because those paychecks or those allowances can often be enough money to travel on if you put them back enough. So be smart with your money. There's plenty of opportunity out there to go abroad and to see the world.
Now, when you went abroad, did you feel welcomed and comfortable in all these different cultures?
It did take a while. I think that a lot of the experiences that I had, as many people will say, the first couple of days are always kind of a shock. It's a shock to your system. The time zone changes. I remember going 12, 14 hours ahead and thinking, whoa, jet lag is bad. And then food. And of course, there's always the issues there. But when it comes down to culture, I have never gone to a place where I felt like maybe I shouldn't be here, because I'm going with an open mind. That's one of the biggest things that we have to do when we're going abroad is be good global citizens. Understand that things are going to be a little different than other places, and it take a little bit more time for you to get comfortable with where you are. But people, if you're good to them, they're going to be great to you.
What a great message. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for watching us today. Check out our website, ahealthyiowa.org. Keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration on MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.